You never expect your own child to shoot you in the neck, but that's exactly what happened one quiet afternoon in Mississippi. A 14-year-old girl who seemed to have everything going for her: good grades, a loving family, a promising future, picked up a .357 Magnum and opened fire on her own mother. Then, just minutes later, she turned the gun on her stepfather. What could drive a teenager to do something so dark? Today's story is a tale of falling apart, a slow descent hidden by smiles and academic honors, until the day it all exploded. And the most haunting part? Her mother never saw it coming. Ashley and her daughter Carly Gregg have always been close. In fact, most people would describe their relationship as unusually strong. They're not just mother and daughter, they're best friends. Ashley is a high school math teacher in Brandon, Mississippi, a small community where everyone tends to know everyone else. She's smart, calm, warm, and proud of Carly. And Carly? She's gifted, smart, artistic, maybe a little quirky. But that never bothered anyone. Not at first, but as we often learn in these situations, what you see on the outside isn't always the whole picture. Carly's early years weren't easy. Her biological father struggled with serious drug addiction and was diagnosed with serious mental health conditions, including schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. His marriage to Ashley was tumultuous and violent. Carly, then just a toddler, watched her mother get bruises on her face, her arms, her neck. There were nights when Ashley would run away from home in the middle of the night with Carly in tow. Eventually, the couple divorced. Carly visited her father a few times a month, but she didn't enjoy those visits. His moods were erratic, sometimes cold and withdrawn, other times openly angry. Worse, he drove like a maniac, and Carly later admitted that even as a child, she was terrified of dying in a car with him. Not just of him, but of becoming him. Because, of course, she knew that mental illness could be hereditary. So could addiction, and Carly wasn't without loss. When she was 4, her younger sister, just 18 months old, died. Even though Carly was still very young, the grief had left a deep mark on her. Her mother describes Carly as a surprisingly well-adjusted child, but looking back, cracks had already formed. Despite everything, Carly did well in school. In fact, she was so much better than her peers that she skipped 3rd grade. When Ashley married her second husband, Heath Smiley, and moved the family to a comfortable house in Brandon, it seemed like things were finally settling down. On the surface, they were a normal middle-class family, but behind closed doors, Carly began to change. She was kicked out of 7th grade for bringing a Swiss Army knife to school. No one knew why she had brought it. Some said it was an innocent mistake, others weren't so sure. Whatever the reason, it was one of the first warning signs. Then, in high school, things really started to go wrong. At Northwest Rankin High School, where her mother taught geometry, Carly initially thrived. During her freshman year, she was even named Student of the Year. But just a year later, things took a turn for the worse. She started vaping, smoking weed, texting friends on her disposable phone, keeping secrets. And she started keeping a journal, pages and pages of strange, creepy thoughts. One entry listed her core beliefs: there was no God, no heaven or hell, and everyone could write their own destiny. She called fire beautiful and deadly and powerful. Another entry simply said, "You don't need family." Another, "It's okay to do evil." These weren't just teenage thoughts. They were flashing warning lights. But Ashley didn't know about the magazines or the disposable phone. Or the drugs. She did, however, notice that Carly had suddenly cut off her long blonde hair, something she had always been proud of. Concerned, Ashley even asked her, half-jokingly, if she was trying to act like a boy. Carly told a friend that her new haircut made her look even gayer. It wasn't clear whether it was a question of identity or just teenage exploration. But Ashley was concerned, so she did what any loving parent would do. She sought help for her daughter. Carly started seeing a therapist named Rebecca Kirk. And Kirk didn't seem particularly worried. Yes, Carly had anxiety. Yes, she was dealing with depression. But Kirk said she was coping pretty well. When Zoloft stopped working, however, Carly was switched to another antidepressant, Lexapro. And then, just days before everything collapsed, her mood took a turn for the worse. By mid-March 2024, Carly's friends were really worried. One of them, concerned about her erratic behavior, convinced another student to distract her at school so he could speak directly to her mother. That's how Ashley discovered her daughter was smoking pot and acting strangely, and on Tuesday, March 19th, things came to a head. That morning, Carly had gotten into an argument with the same friend who had tattled to her mother. In front of a group of other students, she cursed him out. But the rest of the day went like any other. Around 3:30 p.m., Carly and Ashley left school together, just like they did almost every day. There was no sign of tension. No yelling. No slamming doors. Nothing, but by 4 p.m., Ashley would be lying bleeding on her bedroom floor. Here's what happened. According to investigators, when she got home, Carly went straight to her mother's bedroom. She reached under the mattress and pulled out the .357 Magnum that had been kept there for the family's protection. She shoved it behind her, walked through the kitchen, and paused to look into the hallway to make sure her mother hadn't left the bedroom. Then, without warning, she walked into the room and fired one shot. Then another. Then a third. The sound of gunfire shattered the quiet house. Carly ran. She ran out the back door. Her dogs followed her, barking and panicking. And then she did something cold. She grabbed one of the house's security cameras and stuffed it in the refrigerator, like she knew exactly what she was doing. Then, when her stepfather Heath came home just a few minutes later, she tried to shoot him too. So let's go back to that moment. Carly had just shot her mother. 3 times. In her own bedroom. The dogs were barking. Carly was panicking. But she wasn't acting like someone who had just lost control. No, she was thinking. Planning. She ripped one of the house's security cameras off the wall and hid it inside the refrigerator, almost as if she knew what was on it. Almost as if she was trying to erase the evidence. Then she waited. But not long after that, because a few minutes later, her stepfather, Heath Smiley, pulled into the driveway. Completely unaware that his wife was dying inside, and Carly thought she was right there waiting for him, he walked in the front door, and that's when he saw her. Her eyes were wide. Her body was tense. She was holding a gun. He didn't even get to finish his sentence before she mentioned it. Heath later told the police that Carly looked unrecognizable. Like something had taken over her. She was screaming, but he couldn't even understand what she was saying. All he knew was that she was pointing the gun at his head, and then she pulled the trigger, but this time, something was wrong. Maybe she hesitated. Maybe he moved. Maybe it was just chaos. But Heath lunged at her, and in the struggle, he got hold of the gun. He wrenched it out of her hand and slammed the door behind him, locking her out of the house, but she had already fired. And Heath had been shot, grazed in the neck, the bullet tearing through muscle. He staggered onto the front porch, covered in blood, in shock, and called 911. Here's part of that call. Dispatcher, what's your name? Heath, Smiley. Heath, Smiley. I was shot in the neck a little. Dispatcher, who shot you? Heath, Carly. Carly Gregg. My stepdaughter. She ran into the backyard. I think the gun's still on the kitchen counter. When the police arrived, Heath was still on the porch, alive, but barely able to keep his balance. Paramedics took him to the hospital. And the search for Carly began, but this wasn't a high-speed chase. Carly didn't get far. Less than a mile from the house, the police spotted a girl walking alone. Calm. Quiet. It was Carly. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She didn't even look surprised when they handcuffed her. Body camera footage of the arrest shows her wiping her hands on her jeans and quietly asking, "Is my stepfather okay?" The cop replied, "I don't know, honey. I can't talk to you about that right now." They gently placed her in the back of the patrol car. She didn't struggle. She didn't even blink. Now remember, Carly was only 14. But what had just happened wasn't a little mistake, wasn't teenage angst. This was attempted murder. And that's exactly what the prosecutors charged her with: 1 count of first-degree murder for her mother's death. And 1 count of attempted murder for shooting Heath. They also charged her with a 3rd count, tampering with evidence. Remember that security camera she hid in the refrigerator? That's right, it went undetected at the first trial. The courtroom was tense. Because the story didn't make any sense. How could a talented, driven, seemingly loving 14-year-old react like that? What was that about? Carly's lawyers argued for a psychiatric evaluation, and the judge agreed. Meanwhile, Carly was held without bail. The prosecution offered a plea deal, 40 years in prison, with the chance of being released at some point. But her defense team wouldn't take it. They believed she was sane. That she needed treatment, not punishment. But here the case got even murkier. When investigators searched Carly's room, they found more than just diaries and disposable phones. They found drawings, lists, phrases written over and over like mantras. One said, "It's okay to be evil." Another said, "You don't need a family." Cold? Yes. But also incredibly sad. And then there was the therapist's testimony. Rebecca Kirk, the woman who had been treating Carly for weeks, sometimes even days, before the shooting, took the stand. What she said stunned everyone. She told the court that Carly had never been violent, never expressed anger toward her mother, never threatened. In fact, their last session, the day before the shooting, had been completely normal. Carly seemed tired, yes. A little bored. But not unsettled. Not dangerous. No voices. No anger. Just a teenage girl struggling with anxiety and depression. So how do we explain what happened? The defense leaned toward a mental health story. They argued that Carly was suffering from a serious, undiagnosed mental illness. Maybe even bipolar disorder with psychotic features. Maybe schizophrenia. Her family history certainly made that a possibility. An expert, Dr. Andrew Clark, evaluated Carly after her arrest and testified that she had been hearing voices. Voices that told her she was better than everyone else. That made her feel powerful. that whispered destructive things. He also said that Carly had a severe sleep disorder, that she smoked marijuana regularly, that she had even started self-harming. And then there was the change in medication from Zoloft to Lexapro just a week before the shooting. Dr. Clark claimed that the change could have completely destabilized her. But here's the thing, Carly never told anyone else about the voices. Not her friends. Not her mother. Not even her therapist, and the prosecution didn't believe it. They said Carly knew exactly what she was doing. That she wasn't confused. That she wasn't hallucinating. She planned the shooting. She hid the gun. She took down the security camera. And then, she didn't panic, she just walked away, calm as ever. They argued that this wasn't psychosis. This was premeditated murder. Then came one of the most moving moments of the entire trial. Heath Smiley, the stepfather Carly tried to kill, testified. He didn't get angry. He didn't scream. He didn't describe Carly as a monster. Instead, he cried. He looked straight at Carly in the courtroom. And then, through trembling lips, he said the words, "I love you." He told the court that Ashley loved her daughter very much. Carly was everything to her. No matter what happened, they would do anything for her. And yet, he loved her. That's when the reality of the tragedy became clear, not just to the jury, but to everyone watching. This was more than just a murder. This was a family torn apart. A home destroyed not by a stranger, but from within. The trial of Carly Gregg captivated the courtroom and the surrounding community in a way few cases ever do, not just because of the horror of what happened, but because of who suffered. And who sat at the defendant's table, a handcuffed 14-year-old girl accused of killing her mother and attempting to kill her stepfather. The prosecution and the defense told two very different stories. Prosecutor Catherine Whitenaman described Carly as deliberate, calculating, and dangerous. Not just an out-of-control teenager, but a teenager who knew exactly what she was doing. In her closing statement, she did not waver. She told us what her purpose was, the prosecutor said. You don't need a family. It's okay to be evil. She pointed to Carly's journal entries. Her fascination with fire. Her belief that heaven and hell were myths. Her own words, "You write your own destiny." The prosecutor argued that Carly's thinking was no accident. That this was not the product of a psychotic episode, but a girl who had been slipping into a dark world for months, unchecked. She reminded the jury that Carly had taken down the security camera and confronted Heath Smiley with a gun. And she insisted, "We may never know why. But we know what. And what is murder?" And the defense, they leaned heavily on the insanity side. They brought in a psychiatrist. They brought in Carly's personal therapist. They read her journal entries aloud not as evidence of intent, but as a cry for help. Her attorney stood up and made it clear to the jury. Carly Gregg loved her mother. And her mother loved her. That love wasn't a show. It was real. Something happened to Carly's mind. And no one saw it coming. They didn't argue that Carly didn't pull the trigger. They argued that she wasn't in control of what she was doing when she pulled the trigger, but the prosecution pushed back hard. They questioned why Carly never mentioned the voices to anyone except a psychiatrist after she had been arrested. They said this wasn't a story about a girl losing control of her reality. This was a story about a teenager who was falling apart and who made the choice to end it all in a destructive act. Then, in a final emotional blow, the prosecution returned to 3 words Carly had written in her journal: permission to be evil. The jury deliberated. The court waited, and then the verdict came: guilty, guilty of first-degree murder, guilty of attempted murder, guilty of tampering with evidence. Carly Gregg, who was only 15 at the time of the verdict, was given 2 life sentences, to run concurrently, plus 10 years for tampering with evidence. And there was one more devastating detail: no chance of parole. As the judge read the verdict, Carly finally broke down. Her shoulders slumped. Her face contorted. She cried, and you had to wonder if, in that moment, she had thought about the plea deal her defense had rejected months earlier: 40 years. It would be a long time, but one day she might get away with it. Now, that day would never come. There is something haunting about this case that lingers long after the hammer has come down. Because no matter how you look at it, whether you see a cold-blooded killer or a mentally ill teenager who got away with it, one thing is undeniable: 3 lives ended that day. Ashley Smiley, mother, teacher, caregiver, was shot to death by the person she loved most. Heath Smiley, her husband, survived, but will be scarred for the rest of his life, both physically and emotionally. And Carly? She's still alive. But the life she might have had, her college years, her career, her family, even her chance at redemption, that life ended the moment she pulled the trigger. What makes this case so hard to handle isn't just the violence, but the personal nature of it. The betrayal. The confusion. The way everything that seemed solid: love, family, trust, was erased in a matter of seconds. And through it all, those who loved Carly never stopped loving her. Her stepfather, Heath, took the oath. Her grandparents came to court to support her. Even Ashley, according to everyone who knew her, adored Carly to the core. So, how are we supposed to understand it? Is this justice? Is it punishment? Is it the only option? There are no easy answers. There is only this: a bright, beautiful girl who scored 30 on the ACT when she was 13 now spends the rest of her life behind bars. A mother is dead. And a family is broken beyond repair. It's a reminder that behind the most unimaginable crimes there is often a long story. Of pain, of mental illness, of missed signs, and sometimes, the people we think we know best are the ones suffering in silence.
Beauty, fame, a multi-million-dollar mansion, a private jet, 3 blonde-haired boys who call her mom, and a husband, once a rising NFL star, now a powerful executive who seemed to love her deeply. But in July 2023, that perfect picture shattered, because behind the lavish gates and those smiling Instagram posts there were secrets, lies, affairs, and one message that changed everything: kill him. Just 2 words, a simple text, but they opened the door to something far darker than anyone could have imagined. Because when that message was discovered, it didn't just wreck a marriage, it triggered an international investigation, 3 arrests, and a media firestorm that hasn't died down since. This is the story of Lindsay Shiver, former beauty queen, mother of 3, and the woman at the center of an alleged plot to kill her husband. And it all started with a smile and ended in a jail cell in the Bahamas. Let's go back to the beginning. While studying at Auburn, Robert met Lindsay Shirley in a physical education class. She was stunning, confident, charismatic, a former beauty queen, Miss Houston County 2005, and a cheerleader. They hit it off quickly, dated throughout college, and on March 6, 2010, they tied the knot. From the outside, they looked like a storybook couple, the kind of love people envy and admire. After graduation, the Shivers settled down in Thomasville. Their home, a $2.5 million estate, sprawling over 7,800 square feet with 7 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, and 4 acres of land. It wasn't just real estate, it was a statement. But they didn't stop there. They bought a second property on Abaco Island in the Bahamas, a dream getaway where the family could escape the spotlight. And with a share in a private jet, getting there was never an issue. Lindsay embraced the role of a Southern housewife, raising their 3 blonde sons, throwing lavish parties, and maintaining the picture-perfect image. Her Instagram was a curated gallery of beach photos, well-dressed kids, and captions filled with gratitude and love. They had it all, or so it seemed. By 2022, cracks began to show. During a family trip to the Bahamas, Robert happened to glance at Lindsay's Apple Watch. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was instinct, but what he saw left him stunned. Messages from an 18-year-old girl Lindsay claimed had somehow snuck into their vacation home. Robert confronted her. There were arguments, regret, tears, but for the sake of their sons, they decided to work through it. Still, Lindsay's behavior changed. She started taking more solo trips to their Bahamas house. She stayed longer, she grew distant. Robert's gut told him something wasn't right. So he did what many suspicious spouses do. He hired a private investigator, and that changed everything. In early 2023, the private investigator came back with photos. Clear, undeniable images of Lindsay, now 36, intimately spending time with a 28-year-old bartender named Taryn Adrian Bethel. Adrian worked at Grabber's Bar and Grill on Great Guana Key, just a short distance from the Shivers Island home. The photos showed them together, laughing, holding hands, unmistakably close. Robert confronted Adrian, but instead of an argument, there was sarcasm. "Thanks for taking care of my wife," he reportedly said. Then on April 5, 2023, Robert filed for divorce. His grounds: adultery. He sought full custody of their children, sole ownership of the mansion, the truck, the furnishings, and even requested a restraining order against Lindsay. The gloves were off, but Lindsay wasn't backing down without a fight. The very next day, she filed a countersuit. Her allegations, emotional and physical cruelty from Robert, she claimed she no longer felt safe in their home. And so began the he said, she said battle. Robert argued that Lindsay was capable of working. After all, she had a degree in marketing. Lindsay fired back, saying she was a stay-at-home mom and couldn't just go out and find a job. She also accused him of cutting her off financially, locking her out of their accounts, and keeping the children from her for extended periods. Things weren't just getting ugly, they were turning toxic. And that toxicity made its way into the police records. Between February and April of 2023, 911 dispatchers received multiple calls from both Robert and Lindsay. Possessions, power. On February 20th, Robert asked police to escort him to their home in Georgia so he could retrieve his phone. Lindsay had cut it off. He was afraid she might try to trap him the moment he walked through the door. She might call the police and scream that she's being killed, he told the dispatcher, just to set me up. Then came April 12th, another call. This time, Robert said an envelope had been left in his mailbox. Inside, a USB drive containing private photos of Lindsay from a recent trip to the Bahamas. The same package was also sent to his parents' home. No return address, just photos. Someone was sending a message. On April 30th, Robert called 911 again. Lindsay, he claimed, had tailed his mother's car trying to find the kids. She had made threats, erratic behavior. Even Lindsay's own parents were reportedly concerned about her mental health. Bodycam footage from the responding officers showed his mother saying, "She's not answering anyone. We truly think she might have killed herself." Then came July 16th, 2023. It was supposed to be a family vacation. Lindsay and Robert, still living under the same roof despite being divorced, had agreed to travel with the kids to the Bahamas. But by now, trust had evaporated. Robert told police Lindsay had planned to abandon the kids and sneak off with her boyfriend on his private jet. He was adamant Lindsay was not going. He told her she wasn't coming. There was a confrontation. Police were called. Once again, no charges were filed. In the end, Lindsay still made it to the Bahamas. And then, without anyone realizing, it was all about to turn into a murder investigation. All because of a break-in at a beach bar. It all started with a break-in. Just a routine investigation, at least. That's what Bahamian police thought when they arrived at Grabber's Bar and Grill, a beachfront restaurant where Adrian Bethel, Lindsay Shiver's alleged boyfriend, worked as a night manager. But something wasn't right. There were no clear signs of forced entry, no shattered windows. But officers suspected it was an inside job, someone with a key or at least familiar with the place. So as part of standard procedure, they checked Adrian's phone. And that changed everything. On that phone, police accidentally uncovered a string of encrypted and deleted messages, some of which had recently been recovered. They weren't about the break-in, they were worse. Screenshots revealed Lindsay, Adrian, and a third man, Farron Newbold Jr., 29, reportedly a friend of Adrian, engaged in a disturbing group chat, the most damning message. Lindsay had sent a photo of Robert, her husband, taken at Grabber's just days earlier. The caption, "Kill him." Those two words sent immediate alarm bells. Was it a joke, an outburst, or an order? Investigators weren't about to take chances. They alerted U.S. authorities. Robert Shiver was contacted and immediately evacuated his children from the Bahamas, flying straight back to Georgia. The threat was real. And the evidence was mounting. Authorities dug deeper. Phone records, travel data, message history. They began piecing together what appeared to be a murder-for-hire plot, allegedly orchestrated by Lindsay to have Robert killed while on a family vacation. And if not for a random break-in investigation, they might have gone through with it. On July 21, 2023, Bahamian police made their move. All three suspects, Lindsay Shiver, Adrian Bethel, and Farron Newbold Jr., were arrested. It was a shocking turn. A former beauty queen, a cheerleader, a Southern mom of three, now handcuffed and charged with conspiracy to commit murder. For 19 days, Lindsay was held inside Fox Hill Prison in Nassau, one of the most notorious detention centers in the Caribbean. A place known for overcrowding, harsh conditions, and violent treatment. This was no longer a vacation. Her family was stunned. They insisted it was all a misunderstanding, that Lindsay was incapable of doing something like this. They posted her bail $100,000, and she was eventually released on August 9, 2023, under strict conditions. She had to wear a GPS ankle monitor, report regularly to the police, and most critically, remain in the Bahamas. Adrian and Farron were also granted bail, $20,000 each, under similar restrictions. No contact with each other, no travel, and no communication with Robert Shiver. But this is where things got stranger. In one of their earliest court appearances, observers noticed Lindsay and Adrian whispering and laughing in the courtroom, giggling like teenagers despite being co-defendants in a murder conspiracy case. They weren't supposed to speak. And yet there they were, exchanging glances, smirking, acting like nothing had happened. Was it nerves, or were they just that confident? Back in the U.S., Robert tried to shield his children from the chaos. He hadn't told them about the arrests, or that their mother was accused of trying to have him killed. He just wanted to protect them for now. But the tension was still very much alive. In December 2023, Lindsay returned to court with a request. She wanted permission to go home for the holidays to Alabama to stay with her parents. Not Georgia, not near Robert and the boys, just back to U.S. soil. The judge granted the request, despite Robert testifying under oath that he feared for his life and did not want her back in the country. Lindsay, still wearing her ankle GPS monitor, complied with all restrictions and quietly returned to the United States. She didn't answer many questions, but in one brief clip she was seen smiling when reporters called out, "Do you have anything you want to say to the boys? Are you excited to be going home?" No words, just a tight-lipped smile. A flicker of something, guilt, defiance. No one could say for sure, but the drama wasn't over yet. Just hours after returning to the Bahamas from her holiday trip to the U.S., Lindsay faced another terrifying ordeal. Someone broke into her temporary residence while she was asleep. According to reports, the intruder scaled the building, broke in through the balcony door, and stole valuable jewelry and around $200 in cash. Thankfully, Lindsay's bedroom was locked, but 2 other bedrooms were ransacked. Was it random or something more targeted? No suspects were named. But Lindsay, already under GPS surveillance, facing potential years behind bars, now had one more reason to fear for her safety. As the legal process plays out, one looming question remains. What really happened between Lindsay and Robert Shiver? Was it a marriage gone wrong, a moment of madness? Or was it something darker, planned, deliberate, and nearly carried out? Did Lindsay confess? That's when things got complicated. In court, her defense attorney insisted she had never confessed to anything. The infamous "kill him" text, they argued, was nothing more than a vent, a moment of frustration, not a real threat. But prosecutors pushed back hard. They read excerpts from the official affidavit in which Lindsay allegedly told investigators, "Did you tell Taryn, Bethel, and Farron Newbold that you wanted to kill your husband?" "Oh, yes." "Did Taryn Bethel say he wanted to kill your husband?" "Oh, yes." 2 admissions on the record. This wasn't frustration, it was intent. And if the court sides with the prosecution's version of events, Lindsay could face up to 60 years in a Caribbean prison. Not a slap on the wrist, not probation. 60 years, so where does that leave things now? Lindsay is back in Alabama, living with her parents and awaiting trial. She still hasn't seen her children since the arrest. She accuses Robert of blocking visitation, even supervised visits. Robert argues he's protecting the kids from someone accused of trying to kill him. So, who's telling the truth? The divorce is still ongoing. The custody battle is tense. And the criminal case, well, that's scheduled to go to trial on March 4th, 2024. But one thing is clear, the dream marriage, it's over. And the woman who once had it all. She may have thrown it all away with a single deadly message. March 4th, 2024. The date is circled on the calendar, not just for Lindsay Shiver, but for Robert, their 3 young sons, and 2 men caught up in either a deeply serious plot or a dangerously misunderstood moment. And yet, even before a jury hears a single word, the consequences have already begun. Robert has moved on, publicly. In September 2023, just 2 months after the arrest, Robert was spotted with Savannah Chrisley, yes, the Savannah, the reality TV star. By November, the 2 had officially gone public on Instagram, smiling hand in hand, a fresh start. Sure, it sparked gossip. But for Robert, perhaps it was something deeper. A reclaiming of life after nearly losing it. Meanwhile, Lindsay was trapped in limbo. Constant court appearances, ankle monitor checks, and a life stripped of basic freedoms. No passport, no contact with her children, no answers. And for those who once knew her, the sorority sisters, old neighbors, the PTA moms. Many wonder the same thing. How did we go from Southern Belle to murder suspect? On paper, the prosecution's case looked pretty airtight. They had messages, photos, and what they claimed were verbal confessions, in which Lindsay allegedly confirmed she wanted her husband dead. And 2 co-conspirators ready to help make it happen. They even pointed to motive. Backhand index pointing right jealousy. Backhand index pointing right control. Backhand index pointing right potential financial gain from a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio. What was Lindsay's defense? It all came down to context. Her legal team argued she was vulnerable, emotionally hurt, mentally exhausted, and enraged, that she never intended to harm Robert, and that the "kill him" text wasn't a command. It was an outburst. In other words, she vented, they overreacted. But here's the problem, when venting includes sending a photo of your husband to 2 men, one of whom you're romantically involved with. Prosecutors argued that crosses the line, especially when it happened during a family vacation in the Bahamas. And there's another layer to this story, one that hasn't been talked about much. 3 boys caught in a storm they never asked for, a mother accused of trying to kill their father, a father shielding them from truths no child should have to bear. In court documents, Lindsay claims Robert has blocked the kids from seeing her even during supervised visits. She says she's being punished, emotionally exiled, that he's using fear to sever their mother-child bond. Robert, for his part, insists he's acting in their best interests, protecting them from trauma, confusion, and danger. There are no easy answers, only painful trade-offs. The court will ultimately decide custody, visitation rights, and the relationship Lindsay will have with her sons, if any. But one thing is clear, even if she's declared innocent, this family is already broken. What happens if she's convicted? Well, Fox Hill Prison is probably not a place you want to end up. Located in Nassau, it's been condemned by human rights groups for severe overcrowding, poor sanitation, and lack of medical care. Inmates often share a 6x 10-foot cell with several others, no mattresses, and just a bucket for a toilet. If found guilty, Lindsay could face up to 60 years in conditions like these. Adrian and Farron, same charges, same risks. So far, all 3 remain out on bail, monitored, restricted, and barred from contacting each other or Robert. Prosecutors are building their case. Defense attorneys are scrambling. And the media. They're waiting because this is not just a legal battle. This is a tabloid storm. There's a reason stories like this grip us so tightly, because they turn the familiar into the unimaginable. We've all seen those perfect couples in photos. Smiling faces on Instagram, family pictures on the beach, anniversary congratulations, but behind those pictures, what else is really going on? Control. Infidelity, secrets. That's why this story isn't just a scandal. It's a cautionary tale about how appearances can be deceiving, and how love can quickly turn into rage. At first, Robert and Lindsay were college sweethearts. He was a football player, she was a cheerleader. The royal family of Auburn University. They had a multi-million-dollar home, a private jet, a fairy tale life, but fairy tales don't always last. And sometimes they end not with heartbreak, but with handcuffs. Here's the hardest part. We don't know if Lindsay is guilty. Only the court can decide that. But what we do know is someone somewhere is plotting, and someone else almost lost their life because of it. And it happens more often than you think. According to FBI statistics, contract killings aren't just fiction. From 2012 to 2022, there were over 800 recorded cases in the U.S. alone, most involved spouses or lovers. In nearly 40% of those cases, the mastermind was a woman. That's the scary part, because that means the person who wants you dead. It could be the one who once swore to love you forever. So where does this story go from here? Lindsay's trial is scheduled for later this year. If convicted, she could spend decades behind bars. If acquitted, she still faces the wreckage of the past. Loss of custody, ruined reputation, and a marriage beyond repair. Robert. He's rebuilding a new relationship, a future that hopefully doesn't involve looking back. But who's the real victim? 3 boys, young, innocent, forever marked by a summer that shattered their family. Maybe Lindsay was venting, maybe she meant it. But no matter what the verdict says, the damage is done. If you found this story compelling, like the video. Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. We'll be bringing you more true crime stories. More lies, more secrets, more justice. Because behind every perfect photo, there's always more than meets the eye. Until next time, stay safe. And never ignore the silent warnings. They might just save your life.
Ujaras, a small town nestled quietly among the lush green coffee hills of Costa Rica. It is famous for its peaceful landscape, friendly people, and small roads winding through the countryside. Every evening, the sound of cicadas calling for summer blends with the sound of dogs barking in the distance. Every house closes early, yellow lights flickering through the curtains. No one expected this place to become the center of one of the most shocking cases in the country. On the evening of March 4, 2020, Ujaras was as quiet as ever. In a small house near an old stone bridge, Yendrai Vesquez, a single mother, was cleaning her hair salon after a long day. The clock struck 9 p.m. Everything was familiar: the ticking of the clock, the smell of shampoo still lingering on the towels, and the living room light still on, waiting for her little daughter, Allison, to come home. There was just one strange thing: Yendrai's phone rang at 8:45 p.m. That was the last message from Allison. "Mom, there are two strange men following me. I'll be back soon." Then there was silence. Eerie silence. Yendrai immediately ran to the bridge where she usually picked up her child, but saw no one. That deserted road, once a familiar way home, suddenly became cold as if swallowing all sounds. In the dim light, only one thing was clear: the growing anxiety in a mother's heart. When she got home and saw the door still open, the lights still on, but no one in the house, Yendrai knew something was wrong. She started calling each of Allison's relatives, each of her friends. No one knew anything. Her boyfriend, Harold, was also confused. "She just left my house, said she was coming back by bus." The calls were urgent. Footsteps were heard throughout the village. Flashlights were shining across the coffee garden. But Allison was still nowhere to be found. And then, at around 1 a.m., 3 hours after the loss of contact, Ms. Yendrai arrived at the police station. In a broken voice, she could only manage to show a photograph. "This is what my son was wearing today. Please find my son." The next morning, the news spread throughout the community. Police, residents, neighbors, all poured into the surrounding areas. But what they found made things worse. On March 5, less than 24 hours after the disappearance, Allison's glasses were found, lying quietly in the grass on the side of the road, about a kilometer from her house. The frames were broken. There was no blood. No signs of a struggle. No other footprints, but the creepy feeling that something was very wrong began to pervade the entire town. Allison Bonilla, 18 years old, was a night high school student in Cartago, Costa Rica. An only child in a small family, she lived with her mother and dreamed of becoming a model or a chef. On the night of March 4, 2020, after leaving her boyfriend's house, Allison took the bus home as usual. She texted her mother and boyfriend that she was being followed. Then she disappeared without a trace. It took more than 6 months to find her body, scattered in a remote landfill. During that time, her family, her community, and an entire nation lived in hope. And then collapsed in grief. How could an innocent girl, from a normal family, become the target of such a horrific crime? Who was stalking Allison in the dark? Why didn't she wait for her boyfriend to pick her up, instead of running home alone on a dangerous road? And why, amid hundreds of clues, did everything seem to vanish into thin air? Could it be that familiarity becomes a trap? Could it be that the person we trust is hiding a demon inside? Allison Bonilla was born in Cartago, Costa Rica on November 7, 2001. As an only child, she grew up with the complete love of her mother, Yendrai, along with her grandparents and Aunt Zamara. Allison never knew who her father was. He abandoned her and her mother right after she found out she was pregnant. It was only when he was about to die of lung cancer that he asked to see his daughter one last time. But the lack of a father did not break Allison. She was an optimistic girl, always smiling, loved to help others, and always dreamed of being a model or opening a bakery. She cried when she could not find a job to help her mother pay the bills, but still tried to learn baking and get a certificate. Every Father's Day, she gave a gift to her mother, who had been both her mother and father for 18 years. The relationship between the two was not simply mother and daughter, but best friends, confidants. Allison once said, "I don't need much. Just coming home every night and seeing my mother, there is enough." From the moment Allison went missing, police and relatives began to ask questions. Who was the last person to see her? Was someone following her? Why would a girl who was always careful and always told her mother her schedule walk alone through that dark street? Allison's boyfriend, Harold Segura, was immediately called in to give a statement. He said that Allison had stopped by his house for dinner that day, then left at around 8:15 p.m. He returned 5 minutes later to find her gone. When he heard that she was being followed, Harold texted her to take a taxi, but Allison said she would pay for it herself and then jog home. When Harold was asked why he didn't tell Allison's mother, he replied that his phone battery had run out, and he had fallen asleep. It was only when Aunt Zamara called to say Allison hadn't returned that Harold actually woke up. One puzzling detail: why did his girlfriend text him that she was being followed, but Harold, who was said to love her, didn't do anything more drastic? However, the police had no evidence to conclude that Harold was involved. And then, a mysterious witness came forward. About 2 weeks after Allison went missing, a man came to the police station, saying that on the night of March 4th, he was riding his motorbike when he saw Allison and a burgundy BMW parked near her. What caught his attention were the distinctive yellow headlights, something that only appeared on his cousin's BMW. It was none other than Nelson Sanchez Urania, 28, who lived in the same neighborhood as Allison. Another witness also confirmed that he had seen the car hanging around the area where Allison went missing. Even more surprising, Nelson had texted Allison 2 days earlier, asking strange questions like, "Do you like me?" Even though the two were not close. Allison had politely replied, "Everything is fine." However, Nelson was starting to make many people feel uneasy. On March 26, police obtained a search warrant for Nelson's home and the BMW. From the outside, the car looked spotless. But that was exactly what made them suspicious. The driver's seat and the carpet in front of the seats were missing. In the trunk, they found blood and long hair, along with signs of a strong polish, possibly to erase traces. The police dog reacted strongly to the front seats and trunk. And then, too, blood. Still, the police couldn't arrest Nelson right away. They had to wait for the results of a DNA test. In the meantime, Nelson was still free, but under 24/7 surveillance. Yendrai was like a lost soul. No one knew if Allison was alive or dead. Every day, she still cleaned her child's room, still bought small gifts and left them in the desk drawer so that when he comes home, he will see that his mother has never stopped waiting. On September 2, 2020, the results from the lab left the entire investigation team speechless. The hair and blood DNA in Nelson's car matched Allison Bonilla. Nelson was immediately arrested. At the police station, he confessed everything, a confession that made everyone shudder. "That night, I saw Allison walking alone. She knew me, so she was not on guard. I invited her into the car. But I did not take her home. I drove straight to a farm, hit her in the face, and raped her. Then I tied her up, threw her in the trunk. I drove to the San Gerardo dump, and threw her off a cliff. Nelson said he was under the influence of drugs and obsessed with Allison. He claimed it was a night to satisfy a long-suppressed desire. However, a few weeks later, he changed his story, saying he was coerced by the police. But the evidence was clear. And the first confession was enough to anger the whole country of Costa Rica. On July 19, 2021, the courtroom in Cartago was packed. Nearly a year and a half after that fateful night, the killer Nelson Sanchez Urania finally faced justice. In the audience were Allison's family, her mother, grandparents, aunts, and those who had searched for her for months. The atmosphere was tense. Allison's boyfriend, Harold, took the stand as a witness. He recounted the last time he saw Allison, the panic messages she sent, and his regret for not picking her up at home. Harold's words brought tears to many. But unfortunately, they did not change the nature of the case. Nelson could not deny her guilt. The evidence, DNA, initial confession, blood, hair, all pointed to him. Yet in a controversial verdict, the court sentenced Nelson to 18 years in prison, not for rape, nor for premeditated murder, but for manslaughter by coercion. The reason? There wasn't enough body to determine the cause of death. It couldn't be proven that he knew Allison would be walking home that night. It wasn't clear whether the rape was real or just an uncorroborated confession. The courtroom fell silent. Then a cry broke out from Allison's mother. 18 years. Just 18 years for all he's done? Allison's death took more than just an 18-year-old girl. It tore apart a home, a community, and a belief in justice. Yendrai did not clean her daughter's room. She kept the small pillow, the old perfume bottle, the lipsticks Allison left behind. That room, now a shrine, a tear that can never be mended. On the road Allison walked that night, the family painted each footprint on the road, simulating her final journey. The words "Allison, we are still waiting for you" appeared on every bridge and electric pole. The local community held a parade every month, carrying Allison's portrait and the names of dozens of female victims who had disappeared without explanation. No one dares to let their daughter go home from school alone. Allison's story is not unique. Costa Rica, a country that used to be peaceful, is now facing an alarming increase in gender-based violence. From Maria Luisa Scandenjo to Luani Salazar. The list of victims is growing, and most of them are young women. The case exposes many loopholes. The poorly lit road Allison traveled, no cameras, no regular patrols, the police were slow. It took almost a week to investigate seriously. The law is not strong enough. A man with a history of manipulation, with clear physical evidence, still received a sentence lower than a car thief in many other countries. But more importantly, it raises the burning question: if Allison were not beautiful, not gentle, not loved by her mother, would she have been found? And if Nelson had not known her before, would she have gotten into that fateful car? September 28, 2023, after many appeals, the Allison family finally got what they deserved. Nelson Sanchez Urania was sentenced to 35 years in prison. The verdict: it was premeditated. It wasn't a spontaneous act. It was cold-blooded predation. The Allison family breathed a sigh of relief, but no one was happy. Because even with the increased sentence, Allison would never return. A cross was erected at the spot where the body was found. On it was a photo of Allison, a bouquet of white flowers, and a statue of the Virgin Mary. Passers-by often paused. Some cried silently. Some wrote in a notebook next to it, "My daughter was Allison's age. I walked that way. If only I had met her. If only one person had spoken up sooner. Would Allison still be alive?" And when you turn off the screen, don't forget one thing: somewhere, there are still girls like Allison, walking home on dark, unguarded streets, carrying a small dream. And a danger greater than anyone could imagine. Share Allison's story. Speak up if you see something unusual, don't ignore the small signs.